Wonderful. So I just pressed the button. We're recording. It's too late now to turn back.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. McKenna, what a pleasure this is. All right. Absolutely. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate in my Be and Become project on self-knowledge.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I I hope I can contribute something useful to this. It's a great project, by the way.
Thank
So,
you. How can I call you? Dennis? Can I call you Mr.
yeah,
McKenna? What are you comfortable
certainly.
with?
No, you can call me Dennis.
Okay. Okay. I
I'm
just,
informal.
Dennis, can I ask you? I know who you are, right? But I personally believe that nobody can introduce ourselves better than ourselves,
Okay.
right? Do you mind telling the people who are going to be watching this and listening to this a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Well, I am an ethnopharmacologist by profession, and I've pursued that all my life. And my life has been devoted basically to research, particularly in the area of psychedelics. And that is inherently multidisciplinary. So I worked as an ethnobotanist and did my doctoral research in South America in the 80s, studying ayahuasca and another Amazonian psychedelic called ukuhe. So that's been kind of the center of my uh, professional focus, I guess you could say, for now nearly 50 years. Uh, uh, and then personally, psychedelics have been I guess you could say, a thread that I've followed on a personal level. I've had incredibly meaningful experiences from them. I got into this as a teenager. I introduced to psychedelics by my older brother, Terence McKenna, who is far more widely known even now than I am. He passed on in 2000, but we shared this mutual interest in psychedelics for many years. And, we've written books about it, and people can read that. My memoir is called The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss. And that's a good place to look for background. The subtitle is My Life with Terence McKenna. But it's really my life that I'm talking about. Terence was a big influence, uh, but I also carved my own path in this direction. So I guess you don't need a extensive biographical sketch, but that's been basically the trajectory of my life has been sparked by this curiosity about psychedelics, and of course the realms of the unconscious that they unlock. And I've been fascinated with that ever since. And so it's been personally meaningful for me, as well as a professional path that I really started at an early age. I mean, I was a child of the 60s. I grew up, I was born in 1950. So in the late 60s, when the counterculture was very active, I was involved in all that. But, uh, you know, to some extent, I was involved in it, not really knowing where I wanted to go. And then in when at the age of 18, a few things surfaced that kind of set the trajectory of my life. One of them was in a professional sense. One of them was an important book that my brother gave to me for my 18th birthday, which was called The Teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda. And and that was an eye-opener for me. I think there's generally a consensus that much of what was written in that book was probably made up, at least, or at least, seriously embellished. But I didn't know that at the time, and it didn't really matter. What the book was significant for me to, because it made me realize that there was an ethnographic story here, that psychedelics were nothing new. They'd been used in traditions for thousands of years. So it woke me up to that side of it, the indigenous use. And then around the same time, I stumbled across, or somehow or other, a book that was also important, turned out to be also important, called the Ethnopharmacologic Search for Psychoactive Drugs. Fell into my hands at the age of 18, and I don't even remember how I got my hands on it. It was a record of a symposium that was held in San Francisco in 1967, sponsored by the National Institute of Mental Health. And this was the other side of it. It was a closed conference, but they produced a symposium volume, and by that name, and I got hold of that. And that really provided the other leaf of the page, if you will, or the other side of the coin, which is I realized that there was the ethnography that tied into, the cultural traditions, the stories, the shamanic practices, the anthropological side of it. And then there was a side that was more about the plants and the chemistry and the actual, sort of nuts and bolts of psychedelics, at least the natural ones. And these two things, these two aspects of psychedelics were complementary to my mind. So that's what led me to decide to become an ethnopharmacologist, because I realized that it's a real discipline, and it's inherently multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary. But I determined to follow that path, and so I studied botany and plant chemistry and pharmacology, as well as anthropology and all that, in pursuit of my academic credentials. So that's how I ended up where I am. Uh, it's worth mentioning, I guess, that in 2017, uh, the Ethnopharmacologic Search for Psychoactive Drugs was an influential book for me. And in 2017, I had an opportunity to stage a 50th anniversary symposium in honor of that original symposium in 1967. And I organized that. I had a lot of help with that. It wasn't a one man show at all, but we presented that symposium. And it was not a private symposium. It was live streamed on Facebook. We had at times 75,000 people watching our lectures. And we published a symposium volume, which was a double volume, the original 67 symposium plus the 2017 symposium. So I just mentioned that because that kind of, that's what that book that I discovered at 18, and then in 2017 we revisited it, and that's been well received by a lot of people. It was an expensive double volume set to bring out, but it's been selling well. And it was a fulfillment of an ambition, because I wanted to do this for some time, and in 2017 everything came together and made it possible. That's me. There's always more to say, but that's probably good enough.
So I can hear that you are just a well of life experience, which is exactly why I reached out to you. All right. So first, again, I would like to say thank you very much. Secondly, my sincere condolences about your brother. All right. I don't think that's all. Not I think, just I have a younger brother, and when I was younger, one of my best friends was tragically killed by his own brother in a horrible, horrible accident. So I can't even imagine
I'm sorry to hear that.
how this must have felt. So my condolences, Dennis. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, Furthermore, for everybody watching this, now that we're back, I have such a small heart and such a big open space brain. I will put the resources of all of the material that we discuss and talk about, right, into the description of these videos. So
Okay.
everything that you guys want to refer to afterwards, if it's not there, you can most welcome to reach me privately. I will put all my contact details there as well. And then we just take it from there. Dennis, before we go ahead again, one last thing, and then I will just talk a little bit about what this project represents for me. Where can the people watching this, right, or listening to this, where can they go to find you or to support any of the projects that you are working on currently?
Well, what you want to do is look at the McKenna Academy, which I'm putting, if I could spell it, I'd be putting. So there's the website for the McKenna Academy. And the McKenna Academy is a nonprofit I founded a couple of years ago after I moved to Canada. And as you can tell from the name, it's all about education, and largely education about psychedelics. The full name of it is the McKenna Academy of Natural Philosophy. But if people want to know what I'm up to, that's a good place to get up to date on events I'm involved in and so on, as well as my Facebook page. But I'm much more active on the Academy site now. I'm on Facebook. I try not to get sucked into it, but that's another place to look. Social media is a double-edged sword, as you well know. It's useful for some things, but it's also very seductive. So, yeah. But that's the primary place to look, is the McKenna.academy.
Right. A little bit about the Be and Become project. Guys, as you can notice, this is about self-knowledge. All right. Self-knowledge is about how we perceive ourselves and how we translate this, right? All of this, the world that we hopefully wake up in at some stage during our lives and realize, but wow, I'm actually, me, I'm a 110 kilo flesh bag, which is a bit blunt, with a consciousness and an awareness and certain sense perception faculties. I process, I perceive, I get information. How do I know what it is that's happening? How do I know I feel when I do that? All of these questions.
Right.
So I've been asking these questions since I was maybe 16 or 17. What is life about? How do I know? Things like this. I think I had my first middle-age breakdown even before I was 20, quite literally. This time around, I thought, what the hell? What better way to share it with the whole world than to ask people like Dennis McKenna how they would answer these, quote unquote, I suppose, very existential but self-knowledge based questions. This program is about cultivating compassion between all of us, because I have been in really tough times, and I know, Dennis, you've been in tough times, and I know all of you watching this have been in tough times at some stage or another. Now ask yourself this question. If you had to compare going through that exact same time, feeling alone, and going through that exact same time, somebody else sharing that with you, knowing exactly what it feels like, how would the experience have been for you? And that's what this project is about.
one of the most challenging down parts of my life have been around my brother's illness when he was diagnosed with cancer. And that year when he was dying and the years following were very difficult for me, obviously because we were so close. And when he died, it left a huge void in my heart, because we were so close. It's almost like we were the same person, or I mean, I used to fantasize that I was, we were left brain, right brain instantiations of the same consciousness. Now, I realize that's kind of an exaggeration and not really true, but at times I felt like that. So, in other words, when he died, it was like half of me was just ripped away, and in a sense, I mean, I felt that loss that way. In fact, not really, because in some ways it was never really lost. I have this, vivid memories and still feel a close connection to Terence. He's very much alive for me in the, as a kind of voice in my head, I guess you could say. All I have to do is look down and to the left, and I can call him up like some kind of virtual avatar or something. Not quite like that, but in other words, and I think this is relevant, I don't know if there's an afterlife in the way that people think of it. That your consciousness survives death and that sort of thing. But I think there is an afterlife in the sense that your ancestors live on in you. I mean, and so I think that's definitely an afterlife. Our ancestors live on in the memories, the genetic memories and the personal memories of our families. And I have had some psychedelic experiences around this ancestor perception, and they've been tremendously healing and reassuring to me to realize that this thread is never broken, really. So and that speaks to the idea of being alone. I mean, what the sort of reassuring message that I got from these intense, one in particular, this intense ancestor experience on DMT, the message was, you think you're alone, but you're not alone. We are here for you, wherever here is forever, some kind of spiritual space where, I went to the place where my ancestors, the words don't make sense because it's not a place, it's, but I had this experience of being in touch with not only my brother very strongly, but all of my ancestors going back a few generations to the people, my parents, my grandparents, and so on, very much manifested in this experience. And the experience was so powerful. I was in touch, I was kind of having conversation with these disembodied entities, whether they were memories or some trace of my ancestors in hyperspace, and I was saying, this is so great. I'm so happy. I'm in ecstasy to know this. I think I'm just going to stay here. and the answer was, no, you're not. Your time is not yet. You have to go back and live the rest of your life. But know that we're here for you when the time comes, and you can always tap into it. And when you are done, we'll be here for you. So I don't know what that means, but it was a very reassuring message. So anyway.
Oh my God, I'm so happy I reached out to you. I
Right.
really am. Yeah. You just answered like, oh my goodness, nearly three of the questions.
Okay.
One of the questions down the line, and let's just start with that, right? Because there is no formal structure for this. But one of the questions down the line is, when you went through the darkest, most difficult time in your life, how did you get through it? And what you just said, I don't know, me personally, I would translate that as, and of course this is open for interpretation, but the ultimate confirmation that it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the ultimate confirmation that it's okay. And I didn't see it as an assurance or anything that, yes, there is an afterlife and you can expect that. And, I didn't really put that interpretation on it. I mean, that's one thing you can hope. But the fact is, I think anybody who's honest with themselves, unless they have more experience than I do, and lots of people do, but I feel like when it comes to the question of, does consciousness survive death? I think we have to be agnostic about that. I think that no one really knows. And the honest answer is no one knows, and that's okay. It leaves open the possibility that there is something,
Exactly. Yes.
but maybe not. Either way, it's okay. I mean, if there is nothing after death, then there's oblivion. And you're not going to be concerned about it because you'll be in oblivion, or it's something else. And depending on a lot of other factors, I suppose, the something else could be, the afterlife could be bliss, or it could be hell, and it's probably a lot to do with how you've lived your life. And but it's all hypothetical. Nobody really knows. And I feel like it's just one of those eternal questions that we'll never really know. But of course, when we're in a dark time of our lives, we reach out to grasp onto some kind of hope, and that's what this was for me. So that is there. It's something that I can look on, that I can sort of call on in difficult times, which I'm sure there are a few up ahead, right? Nobody can live a life without having these challenges. So that's just the nature of being.
Existing, exactly.
Yeah.
You hit on many different things. All right. I'm going to start, because a lot of this content and knowledge and wisdom would fit beautifully into the construct of some of these questions. Right. Then that's question one. In your own life experience, what is harder, to change or to stay the same?
Well, neither one is easy. Neither one is easy. If you stay the same, then you're stuck. And downstream, you look back and you can go through this I woulda, coulda, shoulda kind of iteration. I should have done that. I could have done that, and so on. And so it leads to a lot of regret, basically because of your inability to change. On the other hand, changing almost by definition requires that you get out of your comfort zone. If you're going to change, you're really disrupting your comfort zone, or what's sometimes these days called your default mode network. You are choosing to make things uncomfortable for yourself. in the hopes that you're going to gain some insight, some knowledge, some reward for making yourself, for disrupting your comfort zone. So I don't think either one is easy. I like my comfort zone as much as the next person, but on the other hand, I realize that there are benefits from sometimes, pushing yourself a little bit and getting out of that comfort zone. You lose the comfort. What do you gain? You gain the opportunity to learn something, that you would not have known maybe even existed until you did that thing, so overall, I think the ability to change is important. I think it keeps us viable. I think it keeps us asking questions. That's important. I think habit and habit is a magnet. Habit is an invitation to not do those things, to retreat into a sort of a cognitive space where it's like, well, my mind is made up. I don't have to answer any questions. I don't have to think very much about much of anything. And so it's comfortable, but you sacrifice a lot for that. I think this is one of my criticisms of organized religion. And I have many, believe me. I am not, but one of the main things is organized religion, which is why I am not attracted to it. I mean, I grew up Catholic, so there's that. That will wreck a person, faster than anything as far as pursuing a spiritual discipline. But I think that I think that religion tends to give a person a set of answers. People just want simple answers, and religion is only too happy to oblige. Just believe this and you'll be saved and you'll be fine, and now you can turn off your brain and stop asking questions. Well, I don't buy it. That's not what I do. And so I reject most of that because my default stance, basically, or default view of this, of if you run, in life, you're going to run into many people who are self-styled spiritual leaders or whatever. They're going to tell you, we have the answers. All you have to do is follow us and you'll be fine. And you'll be happy and you don't need to worry. And the answers are here for you. It's all written down in this book or whatever. And that's not satisfying to me. I don't think you can honestly arrive at the answers that way. You have to seek your own answers. And the other side of that coin is, don't trust anybody else, but trust yourself, in a certain way.
Yes.
I mean, you have to, spiritual leaders and religions will always say, you have to have faith. You just have to accept this. Stop asking questions. Well, I'm sorry. I ask questions. That's what scientists do. That's what curious people do. Yes. And I am both, I think. And so I think that I think that religion can provide some kind of spiritual solace for people, but it's it's a difficult bargain to make because you have to sacrifice so much. You have to sacrifice your own ability to think and to question and to arrive at your own answers because you're choosing to assimilate a sort of a pre-cooked set of answers that, oh, well, okay, this seems to work. I'll just internalize that. But it leaves gaps and it leads to a lot of No, it's just an imperfect adaptation, and sort of closes off the opportunity for change and growth. It's an invitation to stop doing that, if that makes sense.
Oof, you've 100%. Okay, so we sit around the same fire, all right, when it comes to this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's many different things that come into play, and mainly talking about comfort zones, which can be translated as what is the thing that I have been repeating the most up until now, which is really all a comfort zone is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then if you bring religion into it, like a organized business, right? Um, one of the oldest patterns on this planet, which had been developed at a time when life was so hard, right? And self-knowledge did not exist at all,
Mm-hmm.
that hope was necessary still. Right. So the people that went through hardships, and remember, we're talking about a time when the average lifespan was 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you go through a hard time. What assurance do you have? Nothing. Okay. Now all of a sudden somebody comes to you and says, listen, you'll be fine. When all of this shit, excuse my friends, is finished, you will be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to resist that. I mean,
Of course.
Yeah. There is a temptation to resist it because it's comfortable and it's reassuring, but is it honest?
No.
That's the thing. I would
Even
rather believe a hard truth than a comforting fairy tale.
I agree with you. I agree. And more astutely, I think would be the word to say it. Even if we do not bring honesty into it, okay, and we just work with what we actually can know, the fact that all of the rewards only come after you're dead leaves massive questions.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't experience that stuff now while you're alive. You have to die first.
Right.
So from a very personal point, and like I've spent countless times, days, months thinking about this, I think it's outdated. Done. Like majority of the systems that we're using today, right? Including economic systems, educational systems. It's not that they're wrong, they're just out of date. And they need to be upgraded, redesigned, and just redone.
Yes, I agree. And that's one of the areas where psychedelics can help. I think one of the main benefits I feel personally, people say, what have you learned from psychedelics? You've been taking these things 40 years, 50 years. What is your take home lesson? What have they taught you? And the answer is kind of paradoxical. I could say, well, they've taught me a lot. Yes, they've taught me a lot, but what they mainly have taught me is how little I know.
That's so beautiful that you said
they
that.
Make it clear that however much you think you know, there's an infinite amount of stuff that you don't know. So what that tells you pretty much immediately is there's no reason for arrogance here. There's no reason for arrogance about how smart we are or how much we know, because we don't. The enterprise is inherently incomplete. You're never going to reach a point where you say, okay, I can tie all this up into a neat package, and now I can stop thinking about it, or I can put it on the back shelf. Got that one figured out. It doesn't work like that. So like the more I learn from psychedelics or just from living, the more I recognize how little I know and how much there is to learn. And as it happened, I enjoy learning. So this is not depressing to me. This is exciting.
Yeah.
Some people might feel, well, there's so much to learn, it's hopeless, you know. Yeah, it's hopeless for sure. I mean, you're not going to learn everything, but that doesn't mean you can't approach it. You can't enjoy learning what you can, given your limitations, and that's fine. And it doesn't have it. You know, I don't think it has to be this big quest to get everything
No,
nailed down by the time you
I agree
die.
with you.
I don't think
No.
that's realistic. You know, you're gonna die, and you're gonna die with as many questions
Hopefully,
you know
hopefully,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, hopefully, yes. Well,
Hopefully, yeah,
hopefully, yeah.
yeah. Like,
So, you know, you don't reach some point, and I don't think it happens after death either. Maybe
cannot know.
after,
Yeah.
if there is a afterlife or whatever, maybe at a certain point they say, okay, you know, you've lived your life, now you're dead. Now here's what it was really all about. I don't think we're going to get that. You know, I don't think when we get the recap, oh, you know, here is the secret of life that you just lived through. I think the questions are inherently always open and inherently unanswerable, really. And I'm okay with that. You
Um,
know, I mean, I think we have to
yes.
learn to live with uncertainty. Uh, and you know, I think that's part of what we learn as we go through life. You have to come to terms with it and accept it, and it, you know, and not be depressed by it. You know, just accept it. This is this is built into the process of being alive and living a life, and by its very nature, it's an incomplete enterprise, if you know what I mean. It's so you learn what you can, and that's good enough.
This whole cycle, so evolution blows my mind completely, right? The
Yeah,
fact that we are in this perpetual process that's so many billions of years old. This is where we are, and we woke up inside these things now, right? So we go,
mm-hmm.
okay, what's like? I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it, right? It is amazing. And then we want to label everything so that I can say I know more than you.
Right,
You know,
right,
really, it's sad. You know, for me personally, it's sad. If one really wants to contemplate existence and knowledge and all of these things, why not start with, okay, what don't I know that I don't know? And then you go, oh my God, what just happened? Like, what don't I know that I don't know? Like, what are the things that I cannot even pick up because my senses are calibrated a specific way that I can only pick up so much information of whatever is around me anyway. So by design, I am limited.
right, right, exactly. And uh, you know, again, this goes back to something relevant from the psychedelic experience, which is that our brains are programmed to construct this artificial reality. You know, we do not. I sometimes call it the serotonin hallucination. You know, and other neuroscientists, they talk about the default mode network, and you know, this is the brain is constructed to filter, to construct this model of reality, and that's what we inhabit, not reality itself,
Exactly.
because that would
Yes.
be much too confusing. We couldn't handle the information.
Yeah.
And the brain has evolved over millions of years to selectively filter out things that are not deemed directly relevant to our survival.
Yeah.
You know, and so then that's part of creating this comfort zone, in a way, this psychic comfort zone based on habits and memories and you know, prognostications based on your experience and your memories, and this
Eating.
is the world that we live in, that we're accustomed to and we can navigate. Now, when you do something to disrupt that, to break that up, which is what psychedelics reliably do, and other types of impactful experiences do that too. But when you deliberately disrupt that model of reality, and fortunately it's resilient, I mean, it will come back, it will reestablish itself. But if you deliberately disrupt it in a therapeutic session with psychedelics, for example, then you get to step out of that reference frame and you understand things about yourself and about the reference frame that normally you're not. Because, I mean, it's sort of the old question: what does a fish know about water? Almost nothing.
Of course, yes, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So, and when somebody plucks the fish out of the aquarium and takes them, into the air, and they realize that, oh, wow, this is a completely different thing. I never suspected this.
Yeah.
Psychedelics can do that. That's why they're useful. And in many ways they're useful for learning about the universe. But then the therapeutic applications of psychedelics also have a lot to do with their ability to disrupt your reference frame and let you step out of your box temporarily, your existential box, and gain insights into what your problems are, whether they're trauma or addiction or depression or different things, just by being able to look at it from a different perspective. That in itself can be healing.
Exactly. So what you're referring to is what I call the objective observer. This innate ability we have to sit here and just observe without any judgment, any influence, any conditioning, anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Just completely unbiased, unfiltered.
Right. And if you can step out of that reference frame, you can do that. So then once you've done that, you've got that to reflect back on. You've got these two sides of the thing. You know what it's like to experience it from within your carefully constructed artificial reality, and what it's like, and you also bring with it the understanding that this is in fact a carefully constructed artificial reality, and that's not reality. Reality is over here, and it's probably inherently unknowable. But again, that's okay.
Back to that, like two things, right, that just jumped into my mind. Number one is a quote from W.B. Yeats. I'm looking for the face I had before this world was made. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Perfectly applicable to this conversation. Because right now, in this moment,
right,
for the very first time, I thought, okay, maybe he was tripping when he wrote that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
The very first time I was thinking, maybe actually you never thought about this. Right? I'm looking for the face I had before any of this was made. Perfectly relevant to what we're talking about now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Before conditioning, before any of these systems, I mean, for God's sakes, like last year was the 200-year anniversary, right, of the peak of the Industrial Revolution. That's like 6 generations ago, when equal pay was rolled out.
Right.
So I mean, look at how much has changed. Now people think I'm born into a world, and as soon as I am born, the people who love me start telling me two things: what worked for them and what did not work for them, and how I should live my life.
Mm-hmm.
How the hell are we supposed to figure anything out? We have to get through so much conditioning first.
Well, I guess that's the trick, isn't it? That's the hard part. So many influences telling you what you should believe, what people should believe, what or how you should live, and so on. Uh, and everybody's subject to that. And I think our task, in life is partly to internalize what seems valid, and and not the rest, but mostly uh, learn to trust your own judgment about these things. I mean, you're sort of the final judge, jury, and executioner of your own life. Ultimately it comes down to you, and if you feel like you trust yourself, then you can trust your views on these things that may emerge. And I don't know how you get there. uh, I don't know if you reach a point where you say, aha, I have it figured out. I think this is something that you learn, and it's a lifetime process, you know, of learning.
For me personally, at this stage of my tender young life, I mean, I'm 40, right? I'm practicing thinking less, not more.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Not more at all. And all of this spice that we have here. I mean, I was reading the other night, right? I'm always learning something. And our neocortex, right, the part of our brain that is last developed through evolution, the last
Mm-hmm.
2 million years, it increased, relatively speaking, by about 1.5 kilograms, 3 to 4
Yes,
pounds, right?
right.
And this was out of a necessity to be more adaptable to our environments, right?
Yes.
Survival mechanisms. I mean, on the larger scale, immediately I'm thinking, Marcel, what the hell are you saying? Larger scale, 2 million years, you're only 40, right? This is now my brain going, talking to myself. But it is on the larger scale. Where can we be if we do not destroy ourselves completely? Where can we be? And oh my God, another 2 million years. And then we wake up again. It's infinite. Infinite.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, 2 million years is a hell of a long time, as we think of it, and yet a very short time,
Relatively,
in
exactly.
terms of evolution and those kinds of processes. 2 million years is a blink of an eye, and in that 2 million years, in that slot, we have gone, the size of the brain, the complexity of the brain has increased, but it's tripled in size, more or less. And, we develop these neural structures that enable us to think, and that enable us to have an internalized consciousness. This is what it's all about. And we could get into a conversation about what role mushrooms may have played in this, but it's, I mean, I happen to believe that hominids evolved in an ecology in which mushrooms were abundant. And this is the whole stoned ape hypothesis, but there is,
Logically, it makes sense. I don't think that's a
logically it
belief.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think that was the sole influence, but I think that what science is now showing that psychedelics can do was relevant to this, because they stimulate hyperconnectivity
Yeah.
in
Electricity
the
goes.
brain, in the cortex, right? So they form new connections, and that's got to be related to the emergence of consciousness. And I think that mushrooms were probably a big influence. Why mushrooms? Well, because mushrooms were there, and they don't require any technology. All they require is curiosity. So if you're in the right ecology, these things are there. And, you know, hominids are scanning their environment. They're looking for something to eat, so they can't overlook this. And once they do, things happen that are rather spectacular. And then, but it's not simply that the hominids ate mushrooms and then they became smart. It doesn't quite work that way. But there were epigenetic effects that persisted. So even though it wasn't an inherited thing, the epigenetic effects on brain structures and that sort of thing can be multi-generational.